All right, so 4 minutes after 8, you're here on the AM show. So, what do you make of the one-on-one interview with Mr. Michael Mensah, who is the Chief Executive Officer for the Ewutu Senya East Assembly? Is there anything that he said that you want to have your say on it? Somebody commented about the traffic situation at Kaswa, but if you've got anything that you want to send us and have your say on with regards to that conversation, please send it via SMS or WhatsApp. But let's move on to another conversation. This is something that is close to everybody because this has to do with food. And apparently, what we eat every day could also be killing us. My colleague Joseph Opoku Gakpo has produced a documentary, and it's titled Poison on the Menu. They say it's either deliberate or not deliberate. You may never know. We may never know. We're eating poison, apparently. Joseph,
Hi, Mama.
this is scary.
Is it?
Are there specific foods or?
In terms of specifics, then you don't have to think about the vegetables because we looked at food contamination broadly, but we narrowed it down to two specific areas of food contamination.
Okay.
The first one being the wrongful application of pesticides. A lot of that is featured in the excerpt that we will be putting out this morning before the food documentary later in the evening.
Okay.
And then the second part has to do with contamination of the vegetables that we eat as a result of the use of polluted irrigation sources.
Charlie. At the end of this, are you going to tell us the areas that are safe?
No,
because they are joints, there's the Kolebu joints, there's the Every joints. I don't know about this side of town.
I had a little difficulty filming from the Kolebu joint, so eventually I had to go outside Accra. I went to Kumasi, I went to Atonsu Jinyase. We did some filming there.
Okay.
We did some filming in the eastern region as well.
Okay.
But then the Kolebu joint is a very big deal. It's a really big deal, and I've seen pictures from there in the past about the source of water. I had that on my mind when we were filming for this, except that I had some level of difficulty. But the situation appears to be across the country, not just the problems around the Kolebu.
That's very scary because they say vegetables. If you want to be healthy, eat vegetables.
Exactly.
They are like healthy option for every family.
Exactly.
And to think that that may not be so healthy, depending on how it is catered for.
Yes, depending on where you buy it from. One of the things we found was that for a lot of the farmers, they're under the assumption that when polluted water sources are used for the irrigation of these vegetables, so all of these, gutter areas and water flowing from homes and all of that, when that kind of water is used to irrigate the vegetables, it adds a lot more nutrients to the soil and encourage the growth of the vegetables. But the scary bit is that, unfortunately, for a lot of these vegetables, you don't pass them through fire before you consume.
No, hardly.
Yes, so you would want to eat your banku and your tilapia. You pick the tomato and all you do is just get it, grind it, add some pepper, and then you're gone.
And the onion, everything is fresh like that.
Well, at least for onions, you peel off the very back part, which is exposed to a large extent. So that's a little less troubling.
Okay.
But the vegetables, the cabbage, the lettuce,
exactly.
So all of these polluted water sources are used to water it, and then right from the field later that evening it's gotten off and it's found its way into a Wache woman's joint, and you are then it's handed over to you with all the fecal matter. And that's the interesting point. I had a very revealing interview with a researcher at the KNUST, the horticultural department there. She had actually done a study. She had picked samples of vegetables from across the metropolis and tested it and found fecal matter after she had picked them from the farms and gone to the lab to do a test on them. So then it's possible that for that particular batch of vegetables, it included carrots, it included lettuce, cabbage, and in the lab she found the fecal matter. Then whoever else may have also bought those specific vegetables bought vegetables contaminated with fecal matter and took home.
I've got a question on my mind, but I want us to watch the excerpts that you're giving us because we are the AM show, because you know the full documentary shows later this evening. The question is there a way to wash to make it clean? Because we've been told about the salt solution, which I use often. Is that safe? If you've got the same question on your mind, stay with us. Let's watch the excerpts. We'll come back with Joseph.
Let's look at lettuce, for example. It takes 12 weeks to mature between planting and harvest, but it's sprayed at least 6 times before they are harvested. These chemicals are strong and need to be applied under strict health and safety procedures, with the most important of these standards being the duration between the last application of chemicals and harvest, as Agric Extension Officer in the Fantiakwa District, Christian Zomelo, explains.
As for pesticide, especially insecticide, using insecticide every 2 weeks you have to spray.
Over the 12-week lifespan. Isn't that too much chemical for...
But when it is almost 9 weeks, then you stop your chemical usage so that you have at least 12 to 21 days before you harvest, so that all the pesticides, all the residual effects will break down.
But he admits a lot of the farmers in the vicinity flout these standards and end up risking the lives of their consumers.
Initially, they were not.
Why? Why weren't they?
Even some prefer spraying, then the following day they go and harvest.
Wisdom Koko, another farmer here, admits they don't always go by the strict procedures that are required in the application of these chemicals.
At times, so creating what just my board room to make trouble. As I say, o creating make me up before so. As I say, Nick who need to make me up for to say, but say, try to market.
At times, the traders who come to buy the cabbage put pressure on farmers to harvest just a day after spraying the chemicals. They get upset if we do not allow that.
There's an idea, only choice.
So who can now one cause a or be chat now so chat. I bet I just say beer. Why I can't something if you are over will be for.
The evidence of how powerful these chemicals are lies in the way farmers react to them when they apply them without the necessary protective clothing.
Boy, I don't be brave, sir. What you say? Why am I?
Ernest Boabeng, popularly called Wafata, is a garden eggs, pepper, and tomato farmer at Bregrom. We visit his 1-acre farm. Dark in complexion and fairly short in height, he carries a sprayer on his back and in a black Wellington boot and a long-sleeved shirt, spraying his field to destroy pests.
The waste that comes in good in your mouth and your nose, so that when you are spraying, you will see that you become, it brings you headache, pains, even pains, and you get eyes problem. You share near your boy drone, your yarapa, Miss me boy drone say, what me say, drone you say, I mean to mean that.
If we don't protect ourselves while spraying, it makes us ill and gives us problems. I'm unable to sleep at night. I get fever. I can't even breathe. My body itches. Then I get headache. I'm unable to go to work for 3 days.
Because of a drone and a drone cool.
And in fact, in the home of rice farmer at Suchware, John Aokujiwanu, they lost their life thanks to the wrongful storage of chemicals.
I lost a cousin's daughter to insecticide. The farmer went to the farm, came back, and actually didn't store the remaining pesticides that he brought from the farm. So this little girl took it and drank it and died. It became something that I've been pondering over, and I was that girl could have been a lawyer or a doctor. And I was very saddened by that.
But one way or the other, These chemicals find their way into the diets of many as a result of wrongful application and handling. As the study by Heganana Boro of the KNUST Horticultural Department reveals, a lot of these chemicals are in the diet you consume every day, usually above the permissible limits.
At the end of the study, it was seen that most of the vegetables contained some traces of microbial residue, and then they also have various pesticide residues. They have various residues in different ranges.
During our program, we realized that most of the farmers were using the chemical containers for keeping salts in their kitchen. Some also were using it for water. And in Nigeria, we have a lot of mosques, so they were using it for their ablution, for praying and those things. And it is dangerous with the chemical container. Even when it is, you triple rinse it. You put water inside, you shake it, and you pour it back into the spraying tank. If you do that for 3 times and you leave it there, it still has some residues in it. It's still considered hazardous.
Most of our tomato farmers think that the tomato, you can get the very red ripe tomato by spraying diethane on it a day before harvest. Diethane is a chemical and needs a certain number of days, if not weeks, to break down. To the farmer, it helps the tomato to attain that very red ripe status. So he puts it there. So most of us will go to the market, we'll pick tomato, and you see this yellowish powder on it. And sometimes I ask myself, how many of us really take time to wash this tomato before consuming it?
A recent report by the Northern Presbyterian Agricultural Services documents how in 2010 alone, 15 persons in the Upper East region died from suspected pesticide poisoning, according to the Regional Health Director for Health. In order to contain the problem of food contamination, there is a push for a ban on the application of chemicals to food production. Samuel Atamils is a farmer and the Member of Parliament for Commander Edina Eguafa-Brim.
My recommendation is we need to ban these things. We need to get to organic farming. And before anything,
ban what exactly?
Ban the importation of these things.
The pesticides?
The pesticides. And anybody who is going to handle this should be a qualified person who knows how to handle it. And we shouldn't be, dependent so much on these things. Most of the advanced countries have banned all these weedicides. But then they need to make money, so they send it to us.
Food contaminated with pesticides in the Garu, Boku West, and Talensi Nabdam districts.
Poison on the menu. This is scary. This is some great revelation right here in this documentary produced by Joseph Opoku-Gakpo. And I think before this, I was asking, how do you treat the vegetables to make it safe? Is there a way that you can treat it to make it safe?
So the experts offered some explanation, conversations around making sure that you get it through salt, water, as the way to ensure that it's safe in the end. But
yeah.
The major caution that they gave was that in buying the vegetables, you should ask questions about the source and where it was grown. And you should be clear in your mind that wherever that it was grown from is actually not an area where they may have used polluted water sources and everything. But the other bit having to do with the contamination as a result of wrongful application of pesticides, that's something that to a very large extent it's a little difficult to manage because you can't always be too sure. As you heard in the early part of the excerpt, there's always a caution to farmers that 2 weeks before you harvest, don't apply chemicals because it needs about 14 to 15 days the chemicals to eventually break down. But what we saw on the field was that for a lot of the farmers, sometimes they apply the chemicals and they go harvest the following day and then send it out there onto the market.
And the excuse is that some of the buyers put pressure on them.
Which is obviously not a justified excuse.
Yeah, but obviously they also want to make their money. So if I've given you the reasons I think it's not advisable for me to sell it to you and you still insist. What do I, get to lose? I guess that's kind of the thing that is playing out.
Exactly.
But they've forgotten that this is not about them. This is about the people
consumer,
that will be buying it eventually.
The consumer.
Exactly.
So that then the advice is that as a consumer, then to use that popular saying, vote with your money. So you are the one doing the purchase. Make sure that you are buying from the best possible source.
Is there a way you can smell if it's lettuce? Can I smell can I smell the chemicals?
It's a little complicated, which is eventually, for example, in the documentary, you see where some of the work that the researcher at Ken University did.
Yeah.
She found out that some of the vegetables had pesticide residues above the normal recommended level, and she had to do that in the lab, do analysis and do the necessary testing. On at the everyday level, it will virtually be impossible for us.
I was going to say, so we get mini labs in our homes so that we can test before we use them.
And then the other bit becomes the role that the regulators are, the various government agencies that are supposed to help with the regulation are playing in helping deal with some of these situations.
We do have regulators?
Well, we have the Food and Drugs Authority, we have the Ministry of Agriculture. There is a department that's in charge of pesticide control and all of that. The Food and Drugs Authority, in fact, in the documentary, they admit that when it comes to regulating foods which are not exactly pre-packaged, then it becomes a lot of trouble for them going from place to place and picking samples to go do tests before then they come back and advise members of the public on that. And so it looks like a very complicated situation. Maybe it's, as is always said, it's God who looks after us. Sometimes the medical doctor who spoke to us in the documentary pointed out that usually we have incidents of food poisoning, we get diarrhea after consuming foods, and we are not clear in our minds what exactly led to that.
Yeah.
Some of these things are actually what are causing that. And in the short term, the symptoms of it are what we see in the diarrhea cases that we have, the tummy upset and all of that. But then it could have even longer term consequences. You'd hear from Dr. Dunia Meme in the food documentary where he points to the fact that sometimes incidents of food poisoning, over long durations could even lead to organ damage, particularly when it's coming from pesticides and other chemicals like this. So your liver is at risk, the other parts of your body are all at risk if you are not cautious with the kind of foods that you consume.
And it sounds like everybody's at risk because we see the farmer who also uses the containers for other purposes,
including keeping salt.
Yeah, in the home.
Yes, and it's a very troubling situation. The point is that these chemicals are very powerful. I've gotten feedback since we began putting out excerpts of this documentary. Some people describing this as, in quotes, an assault on pesticide. I have always insisted that as a science person, I'm fully convinced that we need some of those chemicals if we would be able to grow enough food to feed ourselves. So the idea is not to destroy.
But can we do away with them? Though? No, we cannot.
Well, I think.
But listen,
I think we can. But the point is that it's about the right procedures in using them when it comes to the application to food, and the necessary education is to go out there so that then we do the right thing. But listen, if you ask me, we can't do away with it.
I know that you're a farmer at heart. What does it take for me to have a garden at home, so that I can grow some of these vegetables myself?
For example, the former Ashanti Regional Director of MOFA, Mr. Kokumin Kafojo, he's a friend of mine. I've been to his home before, and he has portions of the house, which that was previously when he was in Kumasi. He since moved to the Upper East region, but in his home, he has, a large plot of land that is dedicated to the growing of vegetables and some plantain fields and everything, and so he gets a lot of the food that he consumes right from
his backyard.
His backyard, which is what the government is trying to promote to a certain extent with
but you don't
planting for food and jobs.
When you're doing it at home, you don't necessarily need the chemicals, do you?
You may or may not need it.
Okay.
To a large extent, sometimes it's possible to control whatever pest attacks may have because it's a very small field, using maybe ash from your kitchen and a few other things. But then on the large scale, then it becomes a lot more difficult. So maybe that's something that we should all be thinking
so finally, since you went around where would I find the safest vegetables to buy? We're either talking about market or we're talking about the source itself in terms of whether it's the famous Kolibu area or as where I buy the woman said Ebri. I don't know which part of Ebri and I don't know the conditions, but I kind of just trust her on that. So which places would I find the safest?
You know, unfortunately, I may only be able to tell you about where you can find the most unsafe.
Okay, go ahead.
I actually don't have details on where you can find the
most unsafe. You've seen.
Yes, and we've had researchers point it out, mainly in Kumasi, concerns about an area called Jinyase, which is close to the Kumasi Senior High School, the Atonsu area there. You know, there's a large stream that runs there. Lots of vegetable farms around there. I'm told that area is, you know, one of the places I should really look out for.
Okay.
I'm told there's a place at Kwadaso as well, you know, where they do the growing of a lot of these vegetables.
Okay.
There as well. It's not too. I'm not too sure about Ebri where you usually get your vegetables from, but you can only hope that from.
How about in Accra?
Well, Kolibu is a big deal, except that I couldn't film from there, which really saddens me to date.
Oh my God.
But we should all be on the lookout.
Should we continue to consume vegetables because of what you've seen with your own eyes, you know, from the farmers, from the water sources?
We should, because it's a good source of nutrients when it comes to the vitamins and all of that. But you should ensure proper treatment of it so that then you don't be cautious about vegetable that is gotten onto your wache by the wache seller, because you can't be too sure what she did with it before getting it onto your wache.
Yeah.
But once you get the vegetables from yourself, get some salt water on it, get some vinegar on it, and wash it off thoroughly, then you can be rest assured that your boys will consume it and they won't have running tummy.
Amen.
Amen again.
So the full documentary airs at 6:30 this evening, right here on Joy News.
And then the second part ends tomorrow at the same time.
Okay, so we have part 1 today and then we have part 2 tomorrow, but mainly looking at the water sources.
The water source, that's
then
the focus
also the
for
pesticides.
today. And then that's the focus for tomorrow.
But
there are several other sources of possible contamination, even after the food has been prepared, and you know, how all the food traders handle it. A bit of that to be spoken about. There's another bit having to do with all these illegal mining activities and the lead and the mercury, one way or the other, finding their way into the vegetables, because a lot of this is done in some of the food basket areas. That wasn't an area of focus in this particular conversation, but it's the other bit of it that we should all look like.
So finally, I mean, you're telling the story from all these angles. We appreciate it. This is thorough. What do you want us, as viewers, to take out of this?
Don't just buy food and consume, well, for the fun of it or for the sake of it. You should bear in mind the fact that depending on how the food you consume is handled, right from production on the farm up until it gets onto the menu, there are several areas through which it could be contaminated and ends up as poison on your menu, which when you consume, then you end up feeling the effect of it. In fact, again, in the documentary, you'd hear from victims of food poisoning situation. We spoke to some of them in the documentary, and they share very horrifying experience of near-death situations. You would hear from them. And so just pay attention to that, take the lessons from that, and be careful what you consume. And pray to your God. Maybe that's the other alternative way around it, that He keeps all of us safe and keeps us long life.
He keeps us safe. But if there's something that you can prevent, and He knows He's given you the senses, I'm not sure He's just watching you. If you like, go and do it and see what happens. But thank you, Joseph.
And you know, getting into the rainy season, this incident of annual cholera outbreak that we see, sometimes it's also linked to how we handle our foods. We highlight a bit of that in the documentary as well, and the do's and don'ts. Dr. Done, a member of the School of Public Health at the University of Ghana, speaks extensively about that. It's all featured in the documentary.
Great. We'll probably talk after this, and I know a lot of people will be sending us messages on this expose after they watch it this evening at 6:30 p.m. right here on Joy News. It's poison on the menu. Whose menu? Stay with us. Joseph, thanks a lot. There's trouble brewing at the Gender, Children, Social Protection Ministry. We understand some caterers, school feeding program caterers, are demonstrating. Maxwell Agbagba is on that beat. And we're also talking damaged goods right here on our show. What is damaged goods, by the way? Who's damaged? That's for you to ask Uncle White. We'll talk about that later on here on the show. Please stay with us.